Hello everyone and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We finally saw some much needed and welcome rainfall this past week over many parts of the state that received well over an inch of rain. We'll have much more on how the rain may have impacted the drought coming up a little later in the Mesonet report. But first, we're taking a look at the progress of the wheat crop. Here's SUNUP's Curtis Hare and Dr. Amanda Silva, our Extension small grain specialist.
Well, it's been a long time since I could say we got standing water in the field and mud on our boots. So Amanda, obviously it rained. Is this a crop saving rain maybe?
Yeah, so this is what we call a $1 billion rain, especially for our grain production. As far as forage, it will definitely help to have this rain. When we look at all of our fields planted so far, none of them were planted into moisture except for 2 locations, so Chickasha and Apache. And so when we think like that, effective planting date was the day this rain started. And yeah, so this, especially if the weather gets warmer, with all this moisture now, we'll see some growth and development this fall.
So with those producers who, obviously a lot of producers dusted in wheat, like you mentioned, for this rain event though, there were a lot of producers that were in areas that got a lot of rain all at once. So is that bad for the crop?
Yeah, and actually that was my fear too when I saw all the amount of rain that we were getting in some locations, because depending on soil types, especially those that are more clay soils, we could have soil crusting. And yeah, that can be an issue with emergence, and maybe in some cases you would require reseeding, and so it will depend.
Well, with this rain and more rain in the forecast, for the producers that haven't been able to plant, and we're thinking they might not be able to plant, what's the optimal, planting window? Is that already passed?
No, it hasn't passed. It depends where you are in Oklahoma. That planting date can vary. But for example, producers in southwest Oklahoma, they still have time for planting. Actually, in most of, except for the Panhandle, most of the state, we're still fine with the time we have. And here we are talking about grain production, of course. And so we do have studies looking at late planting day, looking for the adaptation for late planting especially, and that's actually what we are looking for in situations like this, that, for example, if we would get a lot of rain right now, and it would take us out of the field for a long time, pushing us to that end of November type of thing. So that's kind of the research that we are doing, that we have going on, just looking at management practices and varieties that could be adapted for that very late planting scenario. But right now, we are still good. We are just very thankful for this rain. That's really what we need at this stage. So this is one step guaranteeing we are going to have a successful crop.
Well, and just like to mention, we're standing right now in front of a research plot that's been irrigated, and so there is some wheat coming up, but a lot of fields don't look like this, just to kind of let producers know that emergence, still hasn't probably have taken effect yet, but given the rain and the weather, it could pretty fast.
Yes, and so we have a lot of fields that we dusted in, and plants have not come out yet. Yes, exactly. So this was irrigated, so just a little bit to promote that germination, which usually we don't need much. When you look at the USDA reports, you see that maybe planting date, we were not very, very behind, especially because a lot of people dusted in and trying to get into the insurance window. But when you look at emergence, we are really behind on that long-term average. And that is because we did not have any moisture at all to drive germination.
And how does that impact things, like long-term for a producer's production?
You will move the effective planting date later in the season. So that crop will have less time, especially for forage production. You will have less time to accumulate biomass and have enough forage to feed cattle in winter months. And so that is extremely important in dual purpose systems or forage only systems.
All right, thanks, Amanda. We'll check back in with you in a few weeks. Dr. Amanda Silva, small grain specialist here at Oklahoma State University. And if you'd like some more information about what Amanda talked about, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Welcome to this week's Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. When a good widespread rain occurs, you don't want to miss out because you don't know how long it'll be till the next rain event comes around. Early last week, a 2-day rain dropped some nice rainfall totals in all but the far northwest and panhandle regions. 1 to 2 inch totals were common elsewhere, and a strip from Latimer to Adair counties received 4 to 5 inches. This improved our soil moisture levels tremendously in the shallower zones, and it helped some at even deeper depths. This map from midweek shows the 4% plant available water. It shows the amount of water from the surface of the ground down to 4 inches that plants would be able to extract and use. You can see where it rained, everything is in good shape in this zone, indicated by the green color and near 100%. Not so good in the panhandle, shown by the reds. Looking a little deeper, down to 16 inches, you can see the areas that got some of the heavier rain amounts looking pretty good. But a lot of yellow indicates more room for improvement. And lastly, our deepest map showing soil moistures down to 32 inches where no sites reached the 100% mark. Now here's Gary with a better looking drought map for some.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, as Wes told you, we finally got some decent rains in the state over the past week. Now, did it help everybody? And what did it do to the Drought Monitor map? Let's take a look. Well, we do have some pretty good improvements down across southwestern Oklahoma, over in far eastern Oklahoma, and a reduction in the intensity of the drought across parts of central down into south central Oklahoma. But up into northwestern Oklahoma and the Panhandle, unfortunately, we saw more intensification. So more of that D3, D4 extreme to exceptional drought. Those are those red colors. So it just depends on where you were. Where it rained pretty good, it certainly helped. If you didn't get much rain, the drought got a little bit worse. We can see that on the Mesonet rainfall maps. Let's start out with the consecutive days with less than a 1/4 inch of rainfall. So this is before that good rain, and we see parts of northwestern, north central Oklahoma over to northeastern Oklahoma, far southwestern Oklahoma, and other parts of the state up around 50, 51, 52 days without a 1/4 inch of rain. Some parts of northwest Oklahoma up to 85 days. Now, after that rainfall, the map looks incredibly different. So much of the southeastern, let's say 4/5 of the state, in good shape that got at least a 1/4 inch of rainfall. But that northwest corner up into the Panhandle, still going on 40, 50, 60 days, even in some cases up above 80 days. So those are the areas that missed out on that rain. Pretty easy to see. We can also see those vast differences in the percent of normal rainfall maps for the previous 30 days. Now this first map is from before the good rains. Again, we see much of the state less than 25% of normal rainfall in that 30-day period, and many cases less than 10% of normal in that period. So not too good there. But then we look after the good rains this week, and we see much of the state from about I-40 south in southwestern Oklahoma over in parts of eastern Oklahoma. We are upping those numbers to above normal rainfall, and then much of the state to the areas outside of that we see getting a little bit closer to normal 100%. So we have a few more chances of rain coming up, and then it's just what we're going to get after that. That's the key in ending this drought, but also stopping it in its tracks in northwestern Oklahoma. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Dr. Derrell Peel, our livestock marketing specialist, joins us now. Derrell, a lot of people smiling because we saw some nice rain this week. How will this impact the situation for cattle producers?
Well, obviously any rain helps, right? We've been through some extremely dry conditions, so the rain is helpful. We have to be realistic about what it's going to do for us. So it can help the wheat pasture. Other cool season forages may see some benefit from this. But in reality, we're not going to grow a lot of new forage this time of year other than those. We're not going to make a lot more hay. So I think for a lot of producers, it doesn't maybe change the immediate situation all that much, but obviously it's the first step in curing the drought and maybe sets us up for a lot more help down the road.
How are the feeder cattle markets performing this fall, and will this rain help out in that area?
Well, the markets started in September pretty high, almost as high as they were last spring. They did see some pressure in October and dropped a little bit. Some of that may be seasonal pressure, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that the outside markets were weaker. Futures markets had dropped. Now we've seen the futures markets come back, and the feeder cattle markets have already started to turn around, which is a little unusual for this time of the year. The other thing we're watching, of course, is that the volumes have been high all summer. We've been marketing cattle early, and this last week, for the first time in Oklahoma, we've seen a year-over-year decrease in that feeder volume. So, when you add to that and then some rain and the potential for at least some later wheat pasture, all of that is probably supportive for the markets.
Let's hope so. Now, what do the latest cattle on feed report indicate about the cattle market conditions?
The October cattle on feed report showed that placements in September decreased, the biggest decrease in over a year, and then the marketings were higher than, well, not higher than expected, but higher than last year. So the combination of those brought the on-feed inventory for October 1st down below a year ago for the first time this year. We've been expecting this to turn at some point, but because of the drought, we've been placing cattle early. We've been moving cattle into the feedlots. We think maybe now we're at the end of that, and we will see these numbers tighten up and the feedlot production begin to slow down as we go forward.
It's hard to believe we're winding down October already. What is your outlook for the remainder of the year?
Well, we've sort of expected all year that we would see eventually turn to tighter conditions from a cattle number standpoint, from a cattle slaughter standpoint, and beef production. And we haven't really seen that yet, but we think it's about to turn. So as we finish out this year, I think we'll start to see beef production decrease on a year-over-year basis. Cattle slaughter will decrease some as we go forward. And certainly into next year, then, our expectations are for generally tighter conditions on the supply side of this market. And that'll all be supportive for prices as we go forward.
Okay, well, keep us posted, Derrell. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.
Good morning, Oklahoma, and welcome to Cow-Calf Corner. This week, we continue to talk about some of the financial opportunities that lie ahead for us as a result of the drought and the summer we've lived through. And this week's topic is it the appropriate time to cull our bulls? And we'll work through some numbers that we would get into as far as just winter feed costs, salvage value of those bulls, and what we could potentially repopulate with in terms of better genetics next spring. But the first thing that get out in this morning's topic is the concept that I always liken herd bulls to professional athletes. They have a prime of life. It's typically between the ages of about 2 and 5, when we can expect them to cover 25 to 35 cows a breeding season. Takes them a while to reach that prime, up to about the age of 2. And I always say that bulls that are past the age of 5 or 6 are kind of on borrowed time. Like in this example to the Tom Brady, Joe Namath example. Tom Brady's still winning Super Bowls past the age of 40, but for every one of Tom Brady, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of quarterbacks that got injured early. Joe Namath won a Super Bowl at the age of 26 and was effectively hindered by knee injuries after that and out of the NFL or ineffective by the age of 30. Herd bulls are a lot the same. The life of a herd bull is full of perils. They work on all sorts of terrain, sand, clay, snow, mud. They mount any cow, and any natural service can result in injury, feet, legs, sex organs. Bulls get more cantankerous and harder to be around and harder to work with as they get older. They fight with other bulls in the off season. And if you've got a spring calving herd of cows, your herd bulls right now are effectively off duty for about 6 months before next spring's turnout. If we think of 200 days of a 1-ton bull eating 2% of his body weight in forage dry matter a day, that's about 4 ton that he's going to consume before he goes back on duty at turnout next spring. At current hay prices, say $200 a ton delivered for hay, he's going to eat about $800 worth of hay between now and when he goes back to work. Most recent USDA price report for Oklahoma that I've seen indicates that cull bulls are worth about $1 in salvage value a pound right now. We've got a 1-ton bull. He's worth $2,000 salvage value to cash in. We take that salvage value and what we're going to feed him for the next 6 months. That's around $2,800 that we could cash in right now or save. That goes a long way toward the purchase of repopulating with bulls next spring. Other thing to take into consideration is just genetic trend as a result of successful breeding programs by purebred breeders. If we look at genetic trend or average EPDs by birth year in any sire summary for any of our beef breeds, we see that over time, whether it's last year to this year or just going back 10, 20 years, we see that the genetics for calving ease improve, the genetics for growth traits like weaning and yearling improve, carcass traits like additional marbling and ribeye improve, reproductive traits, maternal traits, things like milk, heifer fertility, all those things get better as a result of selection and successful breeding programs in the purebred sector over time. Right now, as we look at financial opportunities that set ahead of us, I'm not suggesting you cull every bull, the really good ones you like, but take a look at age, what they weigh, how long they've been around, what you could salvage them for and what you could save in winter feed costs may go a long way to repopulating your bull battery with genetically superior, younger bulls next spring. Thanks for joining us this week.
It's that time in the show where we check in with our crop marketing specialist, Dr. Kim Anderson. So Kim, is there any big news this week?
I don't think there's any big news, and there hadn't been any big price moves. You look at the wheat market, it's continuing to just waller its way lower as we go down through there. You look at the range, you go back a couple months, was down, $7.80 or so. We got up to $9.30, somewhere in that vicinity. We're back in just right at $9, a little bit below that. It's wallering around, so not much news there. You look at the corn market, of course, we got the corn harvest going on, and it's moving along, and on the bottom half of that harvest, the range from $7.36 to $7.68, currently around $7.60. Really sideways corn movement. Same with soybeans, especially beans. You go back a month or so, it was up over $14. We went down to $13.30, back up to around $13.60 or so. So those prices again are just moving sideways, and that just tells you not much move in the market. Now with cotton, you go back 2 months, we had $1.18 cotton. We are down to around 76 cents now. You go back a week, we were up around 85 and dropped off, came up just a little bit. You wonder what's happening with cotton when you got the drought. When you look at the acres planted versus expected harvested, they're expecting 43% of our cotton acres to be abandoned. You're looking at a 21% decline in U.S. cotton production, and those prices have been coming down. But if you look at the world cotton production, it's right at average. And so we've got cotton in the world, we just don't have it in the United States. Cotton prices looks like they're bottom out in the low 80s here.
Finally got some rain, decent amounts, more than a decent amount in a lot of parts of the state. So how's that going to impact farmers?
Well, it's not going to have any impact on prices right now, and if you look on out to what you can forward contract for, no impact there. What it's going to do is it's going to make farmers' lives and decision making a little better. It gives them, it increases the odds that they're going to have bushels to sell, and it's going to let them sleep at night. And when you can sleep at night, you make better decisions.
I know I do. So for the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about Russia's war with Ukraine. So any news there?
Well, it's still going on. Ukraine is still gaining some territory there. Russia internally is having some problems there. There's a lot of criticism on President Putin and his war efforts. Some people are calling for the scorched earth war in Ukraine, where you just go in and wipe out the whole thing. Also on November the 19th, the deadline for allowing Ukraine to export to agriculture products, and Russia's got to make a decision on that. And the market's vacillating back and forth of whether they're going to continue or whether they're going to cut it off.
Shifting back to the markets, are there any other concerns that you have?
Well, this week the market's been talking about a diesel shortage. They're talking about the levels of diesel in storage it hasn't been this low since 2008. And the reason is we were importing Russian oil that was coming into the Gulf refineries, and they were refining diesel. That oil's been cut off, and so we have less diesel being refined, and we're running into a diesel shortage. Now, that doesn't mean farmers and truckers can't get diesel. That just means they're going to pay a significantly higher price for it. And if you need a large amount of it, you better plan ahead on getting that diesel.
Is there any good news?
Oh yeah, there's some good news. We got the rain. That's got to be good news. That increases the odds we'll get some production. Good news, we're 1 day closer to finishing the drought, and we're 1 day closer to getting all our wheat planted. And then we'll get, it's not how much rain you get, it's do you get timely rains. And over the past, we tend to get that.
And we have more rain in the forecast.
There you go.
Alrighty, thanks, Kim. Dr. Kim Anderson, crop marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Talking pecans now and how the recent freeze may impact this year's crop, OSU Extension fruit and nut specialist Becky Carroll gets us up to speed.
We've gone through probably some of the driest weather that we've had in over 100 years during an important phase of nut development. And so we were really dry during the sizing time, which is June and July and early August, and then we continue to be dry in August, September, and in October. And that early time frame in the summer is when the nuts are sizing. And so they're probably going to be much smaller. But because we didn't have the rain to fill them, that's probably a good thing. Because if the nuts were large, then it would require more water to fill them out and get good quality. And so this year with smaller pecans, the little water that we did have will go ahead and fill them out. And so we're hoping that we'll have small pecans with high quality nut fill. We were really early in October. The 19th is the freeze date that we had. And so our trees were fully loaded with leaves, and a lot of the nuts had not opened yet. Now on the early ripening varieties like Kansas and Pawnee, the shucks had already started to split and they started to drop. And so once those shucks split open, that indicates that that nut is ripe and can be harvested. But until that shuck splits, those nuts are kind of sensitive to freeze. So if we get to maybe 28 or below for an hour or more, those shucks can be frozen closed, and then when it's time to harvest, they're not going to be able to come out of the shucks. We had a recent heavy rain event that was pretty much statewide, or in the pecan growing areas at least. And so that 1.5 to 2 inches of rainfall is probably not going to do a lot for this year's crop. It's going to keep our growers out of the harvest time for a few days, but it's going to help the trees maybe a little bit going into the winter. Going into harvest right now, we're kind of concerned about the production, and talking to growers across the state, some of them have lost their entire crop or most of it due to that freeze. So they're frozen in the shucks, they're not going to be able to harvest them. But we were talking earlier in the summer about maybe having a smaller crop than average, maybe about 11 million pounds. But I did hear some of the growers that grow native pecans talking that it may be cutting that in half. So it's hard to say just yet based on we're not really starting to harvest native pecans, but talking to some of them, some of the growers, they're saying that their crop is going to be okay, but maybe not a full crop.
Finally today, OSU Extension beef cattle specialist Dr. Rosalind Biggs tells us about a program for cattle producers who are dealing with the veterinarian shortages.
Beginning in 2019, Oklahoma State put together a cross-disciplinary team between the College of Veterinary Medicine, the Ferguson College of Agriculture, including Extension as well, and to focus on the need for veterinarians in the food animal sector. We knew there was an issue with rural veterinary shortage, particularly in Oklahoma. So in 2019, we put forward a grant, and thanks to the USDA National Institute for Food and Agriculture, we were awarded a grant to establish what's called the Integrated Beef Cattle Program for veterinarians. We started this program by surveying veterinarians, veterinary students, and beef cattle producers. What we found from veterinarians is that we had openings for veterinarians in over 40 counties in the state of Oklahoma. And so we knew there was a need. What we wanted to do past that was put together a program where we matched veterinary students with an interest in beef cattle medicine alongside veterinarians. And in early 2022, we launched the Integrated Beef Cattle Program. This put 20 beef cattle veterinarians in the state of Oklahoma alongside 20 veterinary students from Oklahoma State. We've concluded that program just in the past few weeks here in the fall, and that program focused on a variety of topics from leadership and communication to practice management, to developing skills, analyzing data, to really create a broader toolkit of skills for those practices in rural Oklahoma to make sure that they're sustainable and able to provide extended services to the beef cattle producers. As we look into 2023, we're continuing with that grant funding, and we actually have over 50 veterinary students from Oklahoma State interested in participating in the program. From that 50, we will select 20, and we're also looking for Oklahoma beef cattle veterinarians and those from surrounding states to participate in the program too. Priority will be given to Oklahoma veterinarians, but we're looking to expand beyond our borders, because what we've seen is we're making connections, we're networking these veterinarians with veterinary students, and we feel that that's really important as we look across our team that's able to support us from the agricultural economics standpoint, from the animal science standpoint, from the ag leadership standpoint, as well as veterinary medicine, to bring these people together so hopefully we can address the shortages we have in the rural space.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can see SUNUP anytime at sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone. And remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.